Sometimes, the hardest thing is not that someone doesn't love you, but realizing that you are still holding on to a love that no longer has anything to lean on. And that's where the most silent wound begins. When you value someone who barely notices you, when your devotion becomes invisible, when your presence ceases to matter. That's the moment when the soul, even if it doesn't say so, begins to wonder, why am I still here? There is no deeper abandonment than that, staying with someone who makes you feel like you don't exist. And not because that person is cruel, but because they simply don't choose you. And even though it hurts, even though we're ashamed to admit it, even though we get angry with our sasanduran, many times we continue to live in a one-sided love, hoping that one day, as if by magic, they will value us the way we did. But the magic never comes, and you wear yourself out. Do you know what happens when someone doesn't value you? You start to diminish yourself in order to fit in. You become softer, more available, more understanding, more patient, as if you were refining your soul so as not to be a nuisance. And in that process, you lose yourself. Because when love is real, it doesn't ask you to shrink it, it invites you to do more. I want to share a story with you, a story that could be yours, or the story of any of us. A short, everyday story, but one that reveals much more than it seems. There was a woman, let's call her Clara, who had been feeling for months that her partner no longer looked at her the same way. There were no big fights, no shouting or scenes. In fact, that was what confused her the most. There was nothing, and that emptiness hurt more than any conflict. He was still physically there, sharing a roof, a routine, a bed, but emotionally he seemed to live somewhere else. Clara, on the other hand, continued to pay attention to every detail, trying to revive something that she felt was fading. Or one night after dinner, he went to another room to watch videos on his phone. Nothing serious, nothing strange, something that anyone could say, well, he's tired. But she got a clue. She looked at him from the doorway, trying to remember the last time he had sought her out. With desire, with interest, with a real desire to be in his world. She didn't know how to respond and cried without anyone seeing her. Why am I telling you this? Because emotionally letting go doesn't happen the day you say enough. It happens much earlier, when your body begins to feel like you're holding onto a story without reciprocity, when your soul silently begins to ask for freedom even though your mind still wants to stay. But letting go of someone who doesn't value you isn't an act of pride or punishment. It's an act of self-love. And I swear I understand it's hard, because you don't let go of what you want to lose. You let go of what you can no longer carry. And here I want you to travel with me to another scenario, perhaps closer to home. Imagine that you have a rope in your hands. On the other side is someone who at one time was pulling with you. You were building up strength, but now that person has let go of the rope. Without saying a word, he jabbed out to stop pulling. What happens if you insist on holding on to the other side? You get hurt, your hands get marked, your fingers, you get wounds that take months to heal. Ooh. Ultimately, the rope serves no purpose but to hurt you, not to unite you. That's emotionally clinging to someone who no longer values you. You pull on a rope that is loose on the other side, but I want you to stop for a second here, because this is not about blame. It's not about blaming the other person for not valuing you, or blaming yourself for having loved too much. Loving is never the problem. The problem is staying where you are no longer seen. And I know you know that. I know you've already felt it. It's the moment when you wait for a message that doesn't come, a word that doesn't appear, a gesture that doesn't exist. That instant when you tell yourself, maybe tomorrow, but tomorrow won't happen either. And then the soul begins to get tired. In psychology, we talk about a concept called affective dissonance. When what you feel doesn't match what you receive, it's as if your heart is on one frequency and reality is on a completely different one. And when that goes on for a long time, a deep wear and tear sets in. It's not just sadness, it's a feeling of helplessness, of disorientation, a loss of identity, because when someone stops valuing you, you start to wonder if you're the problem. And I want you to listen to this with all your sensitivity, You're never the problem for expecting love from someone who once promised it to you. But it's also true that there comes a crucial, intimate, honest moment when you have to ask yourself how many more times I'm going to insist where there's no longer any room for me. I want to talk to you now about how to let go emotionally from a real psychological perspective, not from cliches. Because letting go isn't about blocking someone, deleting photos, or acting strong addict. That's superficial. Truly letting go is an internal process that begins with a very painful act, accepting what's not gonna happen. Accepting that this person isn't gonna change. Accepting that he or she will not give you what you gave. Accepting that he or she will not recognize your value. Accepting that sometimes love goes away without telling God. And I know that accepting hurts. It hurts a lot. But it is also the first step to healing. If you want to create an exercise to start this process, I propose something simple but powerful. Take a piece of paper and write 2 columns. In the first, write down everything you gave to that person. Time, patience, forgiveness, opportunities, affection, dedication, understanding. In the second column, write down what you received. Don't justify it. Don't embellish it. Don't rationalize it. Write down what it really was. When you finish, look at the difference. That contrast is an emotional X-ray. It shows you without embellishment why you are so tired. And it also shows you why letting go is not a loss. It is a relief that you have not yet allowed yourself. Another way to start letting go is what we call emotional reorientation, changing the focus. When someone doesn't value you, your entire emotional world is organized around that lack. You look for, hope for, try, but reorientation involves returning to yourself, asking what you need, what you like, what makes you happy, what brings back the smile that a person unintentionally robbed you of. And in here I want to say something that might shake you up a little. The emptiness you feel is not because of the person who doesn't value you. Your self-imposed emptiness is the result of your refusal to nurture yourself while holding on to what had passed. And it's okay for it to hurt. Pain is not a mistake, it's a message. Do you want a deeper practice? In the clinic, we often use what we call restorative self-talk. Writing a letter to that person, but not to send it to them, to yourself. A letter where you say everything you didn't say, what hurt you, what you needed, what you gave, what was broken, what you would have liked. That letter is an emotional closure, a way of telling your soul, that's it, I said it, I let it go. When you write, the unconscious finds an order that the mind could not achieve alone. And I want you to notice something that always happens. When one begins to put words to pain, the body lets up because suffering is not cured by denying it, it is cured by naming it. Now, as you listen to this, you may be wondering, what do I do with the fear of being alone? What do I do with that feeling of loss? That fear is natural. Letting go is a mourning process. It doesn't matter if the person leaves or if they simply stop valuing you, you still lose an illusion, and that hurts. But it's also a path to yourself, and no one reaches true self-love without going through a bit of darkness. Let this idea guide you. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is stopping holding on to what is already hurting you. And now I want to close this section by leaving you with some questions that may shake you up a bit, but they are necessary. Who would you be if you stopped waiting for recognition from someone who failed to give you space? What version of yourself got trapped in that story and it cries out to be rescued? And what would happen in your life if today you began to choose yourself as you expected to be chosen? In the next few minutes, we are going to enter an even deeper territory, the place where the real reason is hidden. Why we remain attached to people who do not value us, and how that pattern is broken forever. What you will discover next can change the way you look at yourself. And before continuing, if you felt that these words touch you in some way, I lovingly invite you, without obligation, to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a powerful affirmation in the comments that will accompany you today. I deserve the love I also know how to give. There is a place inside us where the real reason why we remain attached to people who do not value us is brewing almost silently. It is not an obvious, logical, or conscious place. It is a more primitive, more vulnerable, even more childish corner, gumaka. And that is why it is so difficult to detect. Because when you look at the surface, you think, oh, Korafu, I stay because I want it, I stay because I have hope, I stay because it is difficult to let go. But the surface never tells the whole story. The truth is much deeper. We stay because there's an old wound that the relationship reactivates and somehow also tries to soothe the... Yes, I know. It sounds contradictory. How can something that hurts also be soothing? Because emotionally, human beings don't seek out what's good, they seek out what's familiar. And heartbreak is often an old acquaintance. I want to take you to an inner territory that's rarely spoken about. Honestly, that moment when you ask yourself, why do I keep expecting something from someone who's never going to give it? And the answer, even though it hurts, lies in your history. Not in the history with that person, but in the history with yourself. Look, I'll tell you something I see all the time in my office. There are people who grew up with intermittent love parents. Parents who were there, sometimes, sometimes not. Important adults who gave affection but also withheld it. Affective figures who appeared only when it suited them. And that type of unstable, unpredictable love leaves a lasting impression. Very deep mark. When you grow up like this, love stops feeling like a refuge and starts feeling like a conquest. You learn that in order to be loved, you have to work hard. That affection is not a right, but a reward, that you have to earn it. And the worst thing is that this model becomes so normalized that when someone who truly values you comes along, you find it hard to believe. It seems strange, suspicious, too easy. But when someone emotionally inaccessible comes along, that's when the adrenaline rush starts. The familiar feeling, that mix of desire and lack that reminds you of something old, something your body already knows, and you unintentionally get hooked. Not because of that person, but because of what that person in your emotional history with. It's not love, it's repetition. I'm going to tell you about something that happened to a man named Martin, a patient I treated a few years ago. He was infatuated, almost obsessed with a woman who never prioritized him. Sometimes she sought him out enthusiastically, other times she disappeared. Sometimes she made him feel special, other times she ignored him. That roller coaster ride emotionally had him trapped. He was always hanging on her messages, her moods, her little bits of affection, and he knew he was hurting her, but he couldn't break up. One afternoon he said to me, "Why can't I leave someone who doesn't even love me properly?" And I asked him, "Who loved you like this when you were little?" He fell silent, looked down, and understood. Was his mother a good woman? Yes, but emotionally unpredictable. One day she would shower him with hugs. The next day she would be cold, distant, lost in her problems. He had grown up trying to win her attention, and now, as an adult, he repeated that same attempt with women who reminded him, without him knowing it, of that dynamic of lack and searching. Therein lies the key. You stay where the wound feels comfortable, where the pain is familiar, where the emotional history repeats itself with surgical precision. And here I want you to notice something important. It's not that you choose to suffer. It's not that you like to suffer. No one chooses that. What you choose without realizing it is the familiar feeling of a love that demands that you fight. And until you discover that root, you will feel that letting go is almost impossible. That's why today I want to help you break that pattern forever, ever. And breaking that pattern is not achieved by saying, "That's it, I'm not coming back." That's a symptom, not a solution. Breaking the pattern involves going to where the story began. No, where it ended. Let's go there together. First, I want you to think about this question. When was the first time in your life that you felt you had to earn someone's love? Don't rush to answer. Close your eyes for a minute if you can. Go back to your childhood, to your first relationships. Think about how people looked at you, how they spoke to you, how they reacted when you cried, when you sparkled, when you asked for attention. That first pattern is the one that is later replicated in your adult relationships. And if your pattern was a love that made you're going to be waiting your whole life, even when there's no one holding your hand on the other side. But here comes something that can really change your life. You are not condemned to repeat your emotional history. That wound can be healed. That pattern can be broken. But to achieve this, you need 3 internal movements that I'm going to explain to you slowly so that they can truly transform you. The first movement is acknowledge the original wound. Do not idealize your childhood or justify those who failed to give you what you needed. It is not about blaming anyone, but about understanding. When you can say, "Yes, I grew up feeling like I wasn't enough. Yes, I lacked presence. Yes, I had to work hard to be seen," the heart begins to mend its ways. The truth never hurts as much as denial felt. Clarity is the beginning of emotional freedom. The second step is to differentiate the past from the present, because when you get tired to someone who doesn't value you, it's not that person who traps you. It's the feeling of being that boy or girl again, waiting to be chosen, and that's where emotional deception occurs. You think that if you succeed this time, you'll heal what happened to you before. But the past is not repaired by repeating the wound, it is repaired by choosing differently. And the third loka, the most challenging but also the most liberating, is to redefine your non-love. Stop associating it with effort. Stop believing that love is enduring. Stop thinking that if it's hard, it's worth it. There is more. No, healthy love exhausts you. It doesn't demand that you shrink. It doesn't you waiting. It doesn't you doubting your worth and doubting your worth. There's something that's rarely said, but it's essential. When someone doesn't value you, the problem isn't your lack of worth, it's their inability to see. And you can't live depending on someone else's emotional sight. I want us to do a therapeutic exercise that I often use in attachment processes. It's not simple, but it's powerful. They're called emotional reparenting. What does this mean? Becoming the adult you needed when you were a child. Sounds abstract, but it's very concrete. Every time you feel tempted to say where you're not valued, ask yourself, what would a loving adult do to take care of that child I was? Let me tell you this, a loving adult would never leave a child waiting for affection from someone who doesn't want to give it. That adult would take them by the hand and get them out of there. They would protect them. I would tell them, you deserve something better. You are that adult. And I want you to hear this. Every time you leave someone who doesn't value you, you're not giving up on love. You're going back to finding the child you once were, the one who needed someone to finally choose them first, and that someone could now be you. But breaking the pattern isn't just emotional, it's also practical. It requires concrete actions. One of them is setting boundaries, not punishments, limits. Boundaries aren't about pushing others away, they're about protecting you. An emotional boundary, sure, it would be something like this. I'm not going to stay where I feel like my presence doesn't matter. I'm not going to invest energy in someone who doesn't return it. I'm not going to chase someone who walks away. Simple but firm. Boundaries. Boundaries that tell your wound, I'm not going to expose you to the same pain anymore. Another practical action is to dismantle the fantasy. Yes, the fantasy. Because staying attached to someone who doesn't value you is never about what that person actually does. It's about who you imagine they could be. It's about that dream you've built in your head. But fantasy doesn't embrace. It doesn't call. It doesn't commit. It doesn't hold you when you tremble. Fantasy only holds you back. That's why I wrote on paper, not in my mind. Who is this person really? What does he give me? What do I receive specifically in my day-to-day life? Reality, when written down, is usually much more sincere than dreams. And now I want to talk to you about something that is decisive in breaking the pattern forever, changing the place you occupy within yourself. Because when someone doesn't value you, you put them at the center. Everything revolves around that person. Your emotions, your thoughts, your energy, your decisions. But in order to heal, you need to shift the axis. Let the center be you. Let me ask you a simple but profound question. How long has it been since you chose yourself first? And I'm not talking about selfishness. I'm talking about emotional dignity, self-respect, looking at your life and saying, this time I choose a love where I don't have to beg. This time I'll stay where I'm seen. This time I'm not gonna insist where I'll only wear myself out. And something magical begins to happen when you make that internal change, Addy. The pattern is broken. What used to attract you begins to bore you. What used to drag you down begins to repel you. And what you used to ignore, the people who do value you, who do respect you, who do care for you, begin to feel like home day. Because you finally coincide with your new story, not with the old one. I want to leave you with some questions that will open a space for internal revelation if you dare to listen to them without defenses. Who are you really trying to get that person to see you, or someone from the past who hasn't been able to see you yet? What part of you is this pain speaking to? And what would happen if for the first time in your life, you didn't expect to be chosen and you started to choose you? In the next few minutes, we're going to delve into even more transformative territory. How to rebuild your emotional identity after letting go. How to trust yourself again. And how to open yourself up to a love that's up to par. What comes next can change the kind of relationships you'll accept forever. There's a moment after letting go of someone who didn't value you that feels strange. It's not total relief. It's not total sadness. It's a kind of internal silence, as if your soul has just woken up after a long night and still doesn't quite know where it is. That silence is the beginning of rebuilding, because what no one tells you is that when you let go of someone, you're not just letting go of the person, you're also letting go of the version of yourself that lived around that story. And that version, even though it hurt, was familiar. It sustained you. It organized your day, your emotions, your expectations. Now, without that bottom up, a void appears as scary, but it's also an immense opportunity to rebuild yourself, this time from a place that's more honest, freer, more yours. Bahama. Rebuilding your emotional identity doesn't mean going back to being a part of yourself to be the same as before, no. It means discovering who you are after having gone through a pain that changed you. Because when pain is consciously gone through, it does not destroy. It redefines. I want to tell you about something that happened to a patient named Sophia. She had left a relationship that had faded without her realizing it. A one-sided love, of the kind that wears you down little by little. After he left, she felt empty, without strength, without direction. And now who am I? She asked me one afternoon, and that's when I understood something that I see in many people. When we love from a place of need, we end up forming our identity around the other person, their needs, their timing, their appreciation, When that other person disappears, we feel like we disappear. But if that reality is not lost, it is hidden, concealed beneath layers of effort, guilt, and other people's expectations, issues. And what we need to do now is start to remove them one by one. Let's take it step by step. The first step to rebuilding yourself is to recover your inner voice, that voice that was silent so as not to bother, to not argue, to not be uncomfortable. How many times did you give in when you wanted to say no? How many times did you keep quiet to avoid conflict, How many times did you postpone what you felt for fear of being abandoned? Now that you've let go, you need to listen to yourself again. And this is done through simple, everyday questions. What do I really want? What makes me feel alive, valued, at peace? These questions seem simple, but they reactivate an emotional compass that was dormant, and when that compass awakens, you begin to return to yourself. The second step is to reconnect with your desires. Not the desires that you adapted to fit into the relationship. Not the desires that were kept hidden so that the other person wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Yours, the original ones, the ones that perhaps you haven't dared to look at in years. And here I ask you for something specific. Make a list again of the things that gave you pleasure before the relationship. Activities, dreams, curiosities, even simple pleasures. You'd be surprised at how many people stop doing what they love in order to maintain a bond that shrinks them. When Sophia completed the exercise, she saw that where she stopped dancing something she loved because her partner thought it was stupid, picarado. That didn't destroy her at the time, but it did dull her. When she started dancing again, she didn't just move her body, she recovered a part of herself that was trapped. And that's how identity works. It comes back in little pieces, in small gestures, in minimal decisions, in moments that seem insignificant, but that, if you look at them carefully, bring you back home. The third move is to develop a new relationship with your own value, because when someone doesn't value you, you tend to see yourself through the eyes of the other person, and that's dangerous. I repeat phrases like, I'm not enough, I must have done something wrong, I'm not enough. But that mirror is broken, and rebuilding yourself means stopping seeing yourself from that place and starting to see yourself from the inside out. Sometimes asking someone to value themselves sounds cliche, but it's not a cliche if you understand something key. Valuing yourself is not a feeling. It's a practice, and it's built with actions, decisions, boundaries, habits that remind you every day that you too are worthy of your own presence. I'll give you a very specific therapeutic example that works. Every night before going to sleep, I wrote a single sentence about something you did that day that made you feel good, even if it was minimal. Today, I respected myself when I said no. Today, I took care of myself when I rested. Today, I accompanied myself when I felt sad. When you write down your value, your unconscious begins to register it, even if your mind doesn't fully believe it. Now let's talk about something I know you care about, trusting yourself again. Self-confidence is broken in relationships when you disarm yourself in order to support the other person, because you begin to distrust your emotions, your intuitions, your limits. You feel that everything you do is wrong, that you overreact, that you feel too much, and when you finally leave, you're left with the feeling that you don't know how to choose, that you don't know how to love. But that is a reflection of the devaluation you experienced, not of your truth. Confidence is regained when you begin to validate your own processes. I want you to remember something. You made the decision to let go. And that decision was not easy, but you made it. That in itself says a lot about your strength. Confidence is born there in those small victories that no one applauds, but that change your life. This is an exercise to work on emotional self-confidence. Write down 3 situations in your life where you took care of yourself, even if others didn't notice. It could be small decisions, like distancing yourself from someone who hurt you, asking for help when you were feeling down, or even telling the truth when you were scared. Your story has moments of courage that you are not seeing. And now I want to get into the scariest part, but also the most beautiful, How to open yourself up again to a love that measures up to you. A love that measures up to you is not a perfect love. It's not someone who never makes mistakes or who reads your mind. It's someone who matches your emotional dignity. Someone who doesn't ask you to cower. Someone who welcomes you with your story, with your wounds, with your light. Someone whose love doesn't make you anxious but calms you down. But to get there, you first need to redefine what you're looking for. I want to propose a very profound, almost surgical exercise. I wrote 2 lists. In the first, how do I want to feel in my next relationship? In the second, what am I never willing to negotiate again? Lists don't talk about the other person, they talk about you. Because when you know how you want to feel, you stop settling for crumbs. And when you know what you're not negotiating, you stop accepting dynamics that break you. A woman once wrote on her list, I want to feel like my love isn't it as a kadraya. That changed everything for her. Because before she had confused love with merit. And now she knew that love, real love, doesn't give up, is shared. Now I want to give you a truth that may hurt a little, but it will set you free. Love at your level will only appear when you are standing at your level, because relationships are mirrors. If you are broken, you attract bonds that stick in your cracks. But when you rebuild yourself, you attract bonds that add light, not take it away. And no, you don't have to be perfect to love. No one is perfect. You have to be aware, present, in touch with yourself. That is enough to open the door to the right love. I want you to imagine a scene for a moment. You're looking someone in the eye without fear, without begging, without disguising yourself. The whole, authentic you. You choosing and being chosen. You being seen. Do you know what that feels like? It feels like home, not vertigo, not anxiety. Home. And that home doesn't start with the other person, it starts with you. With the way you talk to yours, with the way you treat yourself, with the way in which you choose yourself. Because when someone rebuilds themselves emotionally, they don't look for a love to complete them. They look for a love to share from abundance, not from lack. I want to leave you with some questions here that could open a new path for you if you dare to listen to them without fear. Who are you starting to become now that you no longer live around the pain? What version of yourself is awakening behind the grief? And what kind of love do you think could come into your life when you finally recognize yourself as someone worthy, whole, and luminous? In the next few minutes, we are going to enter a terrain that can change your life. How to sustain this new emotional identity over time, avoid repeating old patterns, and how to become someone who no longer betrays themselves, not even for love. Not even for love. What comes next could mark a before and after in the way you relate to others. And before continuing, if this part touched a deep corner for you, I invite you to subscribe, activate the bell, share this video with someone who needs it, and leave a powerful affirmation in the comments for them. Today, I choose myself first without fear and without guilt. There comes a time in the healing process when a silent, almost secret fear appears. It is that instant when you begin to feel better, you begin to reconnect with yourself, to breathe it differently. And at the same time, you feel the fear of going backwards because you know how hard it was to get out of there. You know how much it hurt you. You know the type of wound that story left you with. And deep down, the question that no one admits out loud appears, how can I avoid falling into the same thing again? That fear is natural. It is not at all a weakness. It is the fear that arises when one begins to build something new and fears that a gesture, a person, an emotion from the past will drag it back. But I want you to listen to this. If you are fear, if you have reached this point, if you have gone through detachment, introspection, and reconstruction, it means that you have something that you were not aware of before. And awareness is the strongest barrier against repetition. The great challenge is not to heal. The great challenge is to sustain healing. And that implies something that is fundamental from a deep psychology perspective, is developing a coherent emotional identity. What does that mean? That what you think, what you feel, and what you do all go in the same direction. That your decisions are aligned with your value. That your relationships reflect your growth, not your wound. To sustain what you have built, we need to work on 3 levels: emotional memory, daily behavior, and vision for the future. Let's take it one step at a time, but slowly, as if I were whispering in your ear, because this section is what defines everything that comes after. First, emotional memory. Emotional memory is not remembering what happened, it is remembering how what happened made you feel. And this is one of the most important points to avoid going back to people who do not value you. The mind forgets quickly, the heart does not. The heart remembers the energy, remembers the anguish, remembers the anxiety with which you waited for a message. Remember the feeling of begging for something that should be natural, and that memory is a compass. When you feel something similar again, even on a small scale, your body will warn you. It will tell you, you went through this before. It hurt, oh yeah, it hurt. That internal warning is your new protection. That's why I want to propose a very powerful exercise. Write down, for yourself, not for anyone else, 3 specific feelings that you felt in relationships where you weren't valued. Don't name people. Name feelings. I felt anxiety. I felt humiliated. I felt like I had to prove myself all the time. This list isn't to punish you. It's a reminder, an anchor. Keep it handy, because when a new person comes along who creates something similar, even if it's mild, you'll know that this path isn't for you. Now let's move on to the second level. Daily behavior. Emotional identity isn't built on big decisions. It's built on details, on small loyalties toward yourself that you practice every day. I'll give you some concrete, simple, but transformative examples. If someone only writes to you when it's convenient for them, don't respond automatically. If someone treats you with indifference, don't respond with more devotion. If someone confuses you, your first impulse should not be to clarify anything, but to observe how it makes you feel. If someone comes and goes, don't let soul wait at the door. These behaviors are not strategies. They are acts of self-love.